Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show, Plan Well to Live Well. My name is Jackie,
And I'm Ethan.
and we are your advisors for insurance, retirement planning, and real estate investing. So, today on our show, we have our special guest, Mr. Len May. He is the CEO and co founder of Endocanna Health Incorporated. He is a public speaker, he is an author, and he is a naturopathy and helping folks with their health. So, welcome, Len.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a long bio. Thank you for shortening it. I need to get it more concise, and hopefully I can live up to those expectations now.
Yes. Well, Len, thank you for joining us today. How's California?
It's a little chilly, surprisingly. It's 51 degrees, but it's a beautiful, sunny, crisp 51 degrees for us. LA is one of those places where you can go out, it's 60 degrees, and you will see a person wearing shorts. Then you will see a person next to them wearing a parka and a hat and a scarf. Same exact temperature. So that's
well, I think we're trading spaces with you. I told you earlier, I think we're trading. I think we have 65 degrees here. Yeah. It's very sunny. It started off cloudy, but I feel like I can put on my shorts and t-shirt and kind of look like you in about half an hour.
Yeah, at 65 degrees, I'm still wearing a hoodie. It's still cold for me.
Well, that's kind of what happens, right?
I think your blood thins after a while. But you know, like my parents were visiting from Philly, and when they landed in the airport, I think it was like 62 degrees, and my dad was freezing. And he told me the theory, and I don't know if this is true or not. It's the humidity level. So in Philly, the humidity level keeps that 62 degree temperature sort of in, like, you know, you feel 62 because it's got that humidity level that's keeping it warmer, and because it's dry air, it feels like it's colder. I don't know. So that's his theory.
Well, good. Well, I like visiting California because I have a brother over there, and when I'm over there, sometimes I've been visiting you as well. So cool. Thanks for joining us. And so to our guests and to our viewers, our show today, our special show today, our Live Well segment, we're going to focus on cannabis and DNA and medical cannabis and DNA. And Len May is an expert in the field, and we want to kind of tap into your brain and let us know a little bit about, what's kind of happening in the medical cannabis space.
Well, I mean, what's happening in medical cannabis space is that most of the country is legalizing medicinal cannabis. The states are. However, on a federal level, it's still a Schedule 1. It's such an interesting kind of irony because you think about it this way. Couple things. Number one, cannabis is Schedule 1, which means it has no medicinal purposes whatsoever. Number two, the federal government has a patent on medicinal cannabis as a neuroprotectant. So one hand is telling you that it doesn't have any medicinal purposes. The other hand is telling you that it does, and the government filed a patent on it. Three, the U.S. government has cultivated cannabis for medicinal purposes and has a NIDA program that provides cannabis for people with certain conditions like glaucoma, cancer, etc. And also, hemp has been legal to sell in all 50 states, but CBD, which is one of the active ingredients in cannabis, is part of the Schedule 1. It's still a Schedule 1 narcotic. So there is a lot of confusion in the space. There have been laws are passed that have given the legalities over cannabis to the states themselves. So now that you have the ability for the states to make those decisions, the states can feel comfortable making those decisions without the federal government being involved. However, interstate commerce still cannot be, is still not legal because it's still a federal, a Schedule 1 narcotic federally.
Wow. That's crazy. We deal with it a little bit on our, in our profession. It's interesting that you're on our show. I mean, this is very important to me. The cannabis and the legality of cannabis. But as it comes down to our level, man, when we used to, before cannabis was even state medically necessary, right? I mean, I'm kind of going way back when I got into the business 15 years ago. Part of the things that I do is life insurance, retirement, and any other things that we need. But life insurance used to be, there was a sentence, and it said, do you do cocaine, methamphetamines, barbiturates, and marijuana in the same sentence? And if you said yes, I mean, it's an automatic disqualification. Now, that being said, it's an interesting fact that insurance is state level. And medical cannabis is state level, as you explained it. It's not on the federal level, right? So insurance companies, what they've done is there's another line that they've added. Used to be smoking is a separate line, like smoking cigarettes is a separate line, drinking alcohol is a separate line, and basically marijuana is now a separate line. So where it used to be an automatic disqualifier, now the insurance carriers, because I guess it's been medically approved on a state level, saying, well, if you smoke marijuana, we're not going to automatically disqualify you, but we're going to put you in a risk category. So that's a good thing, I think. It'd certainly be better if it just kind of went away, but at least that's been some changes on our end that we see has happened because it became medically acceptable in the state level.
Yeah, I think it's progress, but I do still see that as a unfair issue, because if you are prescribed by a healthcare professional cannabis as a medication for you, and you have an existing condition that is qualified medical condition, then same thing as you will be taking prescription medication, you're taking prescription medication. Why would that disqualify or put you in any risk category? It's interesting that I was invited as a speaker to the National Council of Self-Insurance in Colorado, and I'll be the first person speaking to the insurance community on cannabis. And the reason why the insurance industry is really concerned, even workman's comp, everything, they're concerned about cannabis is because the risk factors. So the risk factors of adverse effects, that's what I've been told. And one of the things that the reason why we actually started, and I didn't go into my company or anything like that, but just to kind of give a quick overview, the reason why we started our company in the first place is to do just that, is to be able to guide people to help them mitigate or avoid possible adverse events by using phytocannabinoids. And when we met with the FDA, they asked us, what is the purpose of our test? And we told them exactly that. And they said, it's wonderful. We like that approach. However, you cannot make any claims, and you cannot talk about any any diseases, just symptomatic conditions, unless a doctor prescribes and orders the test as a diagnostic tool, and they can do whatever they want. So that's basically the overview. Is every single over-the-counter medication or anything that we get has to be looked at as a risk mitigation tool. The challenge is that right now the industry is a one-size-fits-all model, and that's across the board with all medication, all over-the-counter medication, even dosing. So for instance, as an example, you take an acetaminophen over the counter. If you look at the back of the label, it says take 2 of these as an adult, but it never looks at how do I metabolize. So you and I may metabolize differently, meaning that it has nothing to do with how big we are, how small we are, how much we weigh, our height. It has to do with a series of genes. And I'm going to be sciencey and boring maybe for a minute, but there's a series of genes called cytochrome P450. These genes produce enzymes that help us metabolize or break down different things that we put in our bodies. So there's a specific one for gluten, that when people have a gluten sensitivity, and I'm not talking about celiac, they actually are poor metabolizers of gluten. There's one for lactose, and there's a specific one for phytocannabinoids, which are part of the cannabis plant, CBD, THC, and both of them together. So we can tell if somebody's a poor metabolizer or somebody's an ultra rapid metabolizer. As an example, so I am an ultra rapid metabolizer of CBD. And if I consume the same amount that maybe Ethan does, we may have a completely different experience. To me, I would take the same amount and it would affect me differently because I'm actually metabolizing really quickly and extracting it. So I'm creating really expensive urine for me, and I'm not feeling the effects. I need to take 2 to 3 times the amount that's suggested. So this is the way that we need to look at, medicine as a whole. Everything is a personalized experience. You should look at your predispositions to adverse conditions. You should look at your metabolic function for dosing. And the other thing is drug interaction. So when I had COVID, for instance, I was taking 14 different supplements at the same time. How do we know how those supplements interact between each other? Some of them can be inducers, some of them can be inhibitors. And the insurance industry needs to understand all that stuff before they feel comfortable enough saying, cannabis is something that is considered a medicine, and we feel safe, underwriting that or whatever the terminology will be.
Right. Well, you make a lot of good points. And stuff. So Jackie, do you have any great questions for Len? I know we've been all excited to have him on the show.
I am chomping at the bit. So in doing research for today, Len, just observation as I'm driving here to the studio, I was surprised. I passed 6 different dispensaries in my community. So, and they're more noticeable than before. So explain to me, as I'm not a user because I don't have any medical conditions or medically necessary for a dispensary for me to go to. Explain to me what's the, I understand that there's the surge, if you will, for dispensaries in my community. And if you could explain that to me, or just the avid user or end user, I should say, making an observation.
Yeah, I think it's probably important that we talk about the why. Okay. Why cannabis anyway? What is the purpose of this? Why do we just start with this plant, and what does it do? So, cannabis itself for thousands of years has been something that human beings have used for many different purposes. And if you think about evolution as a whole, thousands of years, there's different things that we have that we evolved out of. Like there's maybe the appendix was important, 2,000 years ago, but right now it's an organ that doesn't do anything. We evolved with this plant. And the reason why we evolved with this plant is because we have this endocannabinoid system. And the system was discovered in 1992. So it's not that long ago that we found this amazing system. And the endocannabinoid system, the purpose of it is a primary modulating system. So what it does, it regulates all the other systems within our bodies. And the way that it does this is it gets signals from the other systems. And think of it as like sort of salmon swimming upstream. It's the only one that does this. It gets the signals from the other systems, goes up the central nervous system to our brain. And then the brain tells us to secrete neurochemicals. And the goal of this is to maintain balance or homeostasis within our bodies. So the 2 neurochemicals that the endocannabinoid system uses are called anandamide and 2-AG. So the word anand means bliss in Sanskrit. So this is our bliss hormone. And let's say that you have a stressful event. You're driving, you're in traffic, you're running late to the live taping of the show. So you have a lot of stress. And when you have stress, there's chemicals that are secreted into our bloodstream. There is adrenaline, there is dopamine, there is norepinephrine, there's cortisol. All these things are in our bloodstream. However, when we realize our brain realizes there's no lion chasing us in the jungle, of fight or flight, then 2 things happen. Number 1, there's a reuptake of those neurochemicals. Number 2, there's a secretion of new neurochemicals. One of them, the main one, is anandamide. And that is what we feel when we run, like the runner's high. That's also anandamide. Now, what the challenge is, some people don't produce enough anandamide to metabolize it quickly. When we consume phytocannabinoids, so cannabis grows as a plant, it has these molecules in it, which are the genetics of the plant, which are called cannabinoids. The 2 major ones are THC-A and CBD-A. So when we have the plant itself, the plant doesn't get us high. It's not a euphoric. It has to be what's called decarboxylated, which means it has to be heated. When you heat the plant, smoke it or extract it through a heating method, it drops the acid molecule and it becomes delta 9 THC. tetrahydrocannabinol. Now, this is really important because there is a receptor. We have receptors all throughout our brain and our central nervous system, and we also have receptors in our bodies. There are two types of receptors, CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. When we consume the decarboxylated version of THC, it binds to your CB1 receptor and releases anandamide. It has nothing to do with THC. It has nothing to do with cannabis. It has to do with our own neurochemistry. When we consume CBD minus the acid molecule, it has an affinity for the CB2 receptor. CB1 receptors are mostly located in our brain and central nervous system. CB2 receptors are mostly located in our immune and digestive system. These two neurochemicals that we excrete maintain homeostasis in our bodies. By consuming phytocannabinoids, we get to be able to use that as a supplement, as a nutrient. The same way you were saying you don't have a medical condition, fantastic, that's great. But we take our vitamin D as a preventative. We take our vitamin C, we take supplements. There's no reason why somebody can't take a phytocannabinoid supplement if they know that they have their own deficiencies, because what it does, it actually secretes your own neurochemicals. So to give everybody an example that maybe can understand, think about cocaine. All right. So we talk about drugs. Ethan brought it up. So when you consume cocaine, it does two things. Number one, it actually binds to your dopamine receptor and squirts 100 times more dopamine into your bloodstream than you normally would. And then it blocks the reuptake of that dopamine. So you're constantly squirting dopamine. And then all of a sudden it goes away. And your brain says, wait a second, that was good. I don't have to work hard. I don't have to create my dopamine. So it gives you a signal to say, give me more of that. And that's when you start getting into a habitual cycle of getting more, because you're not dependent on the substance. You're dependent on the most addictive substance that there is, which is dopamine. And that's what happens. So every single drug, when it has a receptor, it's your own neurochemicals that are secreted. So I wanted to make sure that everybody understands that when you're using cannabis and you're using it the way you're supposed to use it, you're actually using it to secrete your own neurochemicals so you can maintain that homeostasis in your body. Now, why the dispensaries and all that stuff? Because it's an amazing business opportunity. Think about it this way. The prohibition has been in place since 1937 Marijuana Stamp Tax Act. The scheduling only happened in the 70s under Richard Nixon, but we didn't have cannabis, even though it was a crop that everybody used to grow prior to 1937, and then it was converted, incentivized to convert for corn and all these other things. So you have a great opportunity, a business opportunity, but there is a tremendous amount of, taxation, scrutiny, and all that stuff, which may or may not be the right thing to do. But the idea is that you now have access to this medicine, and people can take it for whatever reason they want. I'm not a big fan of calling it recreational. For me, it's medicine. There are states like California for recreational. To me, it's an adult use product. And what bothers me is when people start comparing it to alcohol. Oh, you're 21 and over, you can consume alcohol recreationally. Well, yeah. However, the challenge is that this is actually a therapeutic product. There's no therapeutic qualities from alcohol. So and you have to understand that when you're consuming cannabis, you consume it with purpose. And when you consume it with purpose, now you have these stores and dispensaries that are going to provide you what you're looking for. The challenge is that the industry is not standardized. So when you go into dispensary one, you may look at a product and you may look at what's called a strain or a cultivar, and it has a certain name. It's inconsistent from dispensary to dispensary, to grower. So in order for us to get out of the dark ages of cannabis, we need to have consistent standards all the way across, testing, cultivation, everything else. In order for us to do that, we need to change federal laws to accomplish that.
And you know something, I just from you talking and just my own personal experience, the street corner pharmacist, if you will, to where cannabis has gone to today, it's night and day, leaps and bounds. It's so sophisticated because now you've added some science behind it. And I'm just in awe of just learning from you in reading your bio of just how far we've come in terms of the uses of just cannabis in general. Like I said, from the street pharmacist to now to this DNA testing to just really refining how to use it to better our health, if you will.
That's great. And, I want to make a point to some of that dispensary, and you mentioned, COVID and pandemic. And so I know you're LA based and you've been LA based for a long time, but your roots are Philadelphia. Okay. And I'm not sure if maybe you do know, because you have a lot of roots here, that during the pandemic, it was actually the state of Pennsylvania closed their state liquor stores, but they kept the dispensaries open. I mean, I'm a little bit taken back about that whole thing. Like, what happened now? And I'm wondering if it's the medical, obviously like you've explained, it's the medical purpose. Whereas the alcohol did not provide any medical purpose, even though people are dependent on it. So can you talk a little bit about that, their logic of actually closing one and keeping one open?
Yeah, it was cannabis was deemed essential under the pandemic in California and almost all the states that actually have cannabis laws. It was essential. And the reason why it's essential is because people take it as daily medicine. There are people that have seizure disorders. There are people that have, cancer, and there's people that actually take it as a supplement for their ADHD. So if you're actually taking it as a medicine, you're taking it as a supplement, it's essential. And it's essential for you. You have a card that says this is your medicine. You have a condition. You don't have to disclose what condition that is under HIPAA, but you have a condition. And if you miss that medicine, that's what the lobbyist groups did, you may have an adverse reaction of some sorts. So cannabis was deemed essential. It was a huge spike in the use of cannabis, the delivery services and the curbside pickups really picked up. I do want to say that during COVID, I would walk my dog around the neighborhoods, and you go into some neighborhoods and you see the recycling bins were filled, and they were filled with bottles of alcohol. So people had no problems finding alcohol and just sitting at home drinking also. But once again, as you said, there's a difference between, consuming the substance that's socially acceptable as, people come home from work and it's okay to pour yourself a glass or a glass of wine. We need society to be able to change the narrative so that stigma goes away. Maybe on TV shows, instead of, dad coming home from work and pouring him 3 glasses of scotch and having a conversation, maybe they, smoke a joint and have an edible or something like that, and actually have the same normality as they would that's displayed on TV. So I think that the stigma still exists tremendously. And it goes back to this whole, your brain on drugs thing that there's no medicinal aspects to that. There's no research, just a scare tactic campaign. But that's the reason why, cannabis has stayed open. The dispensaries have stayed open because they were deemed essential. And that should say something about, the industry.
Your explanation is pretty detailed. I didn't go that far. My question was like, oh my God, what's happening? That's really as far as I went. But yeah, thanks for the explanation, Len. I kind of want to follow up with that a little bit. And, we know each other personally. And, I have these conversations with family members, old school family members that, in our culture, you come home and your grandfather, your dad, pours himself a glass of vodka or cognac, and that seems to be normal for my kids to see that, and many kids to see that, but it seems to be not normal to say, hey, I have a purpose as to why this cannabis is going to help me, versus just say I'm going to drink an acceptable recreational. I mean, is alcohol considered a drug, Len?
Yes.
Yes. So, and publicly acceptable recreational drug that we see on TV, that we see in our homes, but it seems to be taboo to say, oh, well, hey, I have a sleep disorder, I have, a hunger disorder, or I have a disorder, I'm not a medical professional, I don't know all the disorders that are out there, but that seems to be a no-no. But it does appear very little that it is moving in that direction, and I'm happy to see that happening. I have some more follow-up questions for Len, but I want my co-host to ask some questions too.
Yeah, you know something? When you mentioned just a little bit ago about HIPAA, talk to us a little bit about if I were an employer and I'm screening someone for hire and I'm using cannabis to help me with for medicinal purposes. What can or cannot the employer do or say, or if they're doing a drug screening? And the reason why I bring that up because when I worked for corporate America, part of my hiring contract was I was tested upon hire, and I could get a random test at any point in time. So if I were a user for medical reasons, I wouldn't want that to be a blemish against me or have something to do with my hire. Can you speak to us about HIPAA and employment?
Yeah, this is based on just knowledge that I have from working with different companies, but it's a state, and it's on a federal basis. Federal employees get tested for drugs. Cannabis will be a drug that is going to be removed from that for medicinal purposes. So it's up to the employer themselves to be able to test or not test. I find it extremely silly and unnecessary. Do you test people for other medications that they consume that are prescribed by physicians? Do you test people for alcohol as they come home from from a hard day's work? You don't. So having cannabis testing makes no sense. It doesn't. It can be challenged many times and has been challenged in court and have been overruled many times. People that have been let go for a positive drug test. So I think it's going to change on a federal level, and it is changing now. But even individual private employers need to take a different stance, because cannabis should not be used during the workday. That's for sure. There's impairment to using cannabis. There's there's memory impairment. There's other physical impairments. So you should not use barbiturates. You should not use any type of medication if you're engaged during your workday. But what you do in your own private time should be your business. And if somebody's going to screen you for using cannabis in your own private time, they should screen you from using bourbon in your own private time as well. And that's your own ideas, and that's your own choice what you make. I don't think the government should be involved, or the employer should be involved in that. It doesn't affect your work in any way, unless it does.
So right now, what you're saying is it seems to be in the private sector. It seems to be at the individual employer's discretion as to what their rules are, even though we all seem to agree that they shouldn't be testing for it. But it does seem to be that some employers understand, and then if you provide them a medical note or a medical prescription from a doctor, you might be ruled out from that. But interesting enough, the federal government is actually going to stop testing for medical use.
Yes.
So it's all kind of hypocritical, right? That cannabis is a Schedule I federally, but yet the federal government is removing it from its testing. It's all kind of crazy.
Well, I think the president had create a mandate to release anybody who's been in prison for cannabis on a federal level, which is actually nobody for consumption of cannabis. It's only distribution. So, but the idea is that it's a signal that's been sent to let people know that the federal government now doesn't see cannabis as the quote unquote threat that it used to see. The threat is really pharma and the lobbyists. If you want to get into all that, how it works, and what the lobbyist groups have done. But I think the pharmaceutical industry now is accepting cannabis because they're starting to get patents on their own cannabinoid formulations, like a company like GW Pharmaceuticals that was sold for $7.3 billion to Jazz Pharmaceuticals for a drug that they created, which is called Epidiolex, which is the first cannabis plant extracted drug for a childhood seizure disorder called Dravet syndrome, a form of epilepsy. So there will be drugs that are created by the pharmaceutical industry using phytocannabinoids for specific conditions with FDA approval. That was the very first one. There's plenty that are coming on. But I want to take this conversation up a level. That's not only cannabis. It's all about precision medicine and precision therapeutics. We started with cannabis, not because of cannabis, but because of the endocannabinoid system and being able to guide people to a personalized experience with their phytocannabinoids. But it's across the board. So we have a company that does DNA sequencing. So the way that it works is we have a kit called the EndoDNA test, and it's a buccal swab. You swab the inside of your cheek. We're HIPAA and GDPR compliant. You register that. You send it over to our lab. We'll genotype that and give you a report. We can also take, a raw your report from your 23andMe, your Ancestry.com, any other test. You can upload that, and we'll translate and provide the report. But it looks at not only cannabinoids. It looks at nutrient deficiencies. It looks at vitamin deficiencies. Looks at other metabolic functions. And the idea is fully precision medicine. So doing a whole genome sequence and looking at me and saying to myself, what are my genetic predispositions? So think of it as I may have used this example before. Think of it as your personal GPS unit. And what I mean by that is if you're using a GPS and you're driving from LA to Kentucky and you're not using a GPS, you're going to hit some potholes in the road. You're going to hit some traffic jams. You're going to hit, there's a police vehicle, there's a broken down vehicle. You'll eventually find your way, but you're going to zigzag all over the place and maybe get lost a few times. So if you are actually using a GPS unit, it'll tell you there's potholes along the way. It'll tell you there's a traffic jam. That's what the DNA tests do. It'll tell you your genetic predispositions, so your genetic potholes in the road that you may want to avoid or mitigate. And this has to do with, consuming phytocannabinoids, consuming medication of other drug-to-drug interactions, consuming your personalized vitamins and supplements. Now that you know your genetic predispositions, you can consume your own personalized protocol, your own dosing protocol, and then measure the efficacy of how well that works. And you can measure efficacy by epigenetic tests. So what I mean about genetics and epigenetics, genetics are your genetic predispositions. So you're born with genetic encoding. The expression of that, think of that as a whole bunch of on-off switches. So your lifestyle can determine what's turned on and off. Without you knowing this about yourself, you may be turning on things that you want to keep turned off. So if somebody has a predisposition to cancer, for instance, you want to make sure that that genetic predisposition is turned off, right? So if you have a predisposition to other things that you want to turn on, you need to know this about yourself. And without doing this in general, in all therapeutics, you're actually shooting in the dark. And, my grandfather, when he was alive, he had strokes, like 1, 2, 3, bunch of different strokes. And he was pretty ill over time. But I remember my grandmother and my mom would speak with a doctor like once a week, and he had 2 bags of pills. And every single time they would talk, they would be like, well, we need to change this one. This one interacts with this one. And it's just all in cycle because there is a pill for everything. I was talking to somebody pretty wise, and they said the pharmaceutical industry has the absolute best subscription model in the history of subscription models. You have a pill that is given to you with a list of side effects. You have the choice to take this pill. However, if you express a side effect, there's a pill for that one as well. And the cycle continues. There is no incentive for curing disease because you're on a subscription model. I have nothing against the pharmaceutical industry. I work with the pharmaceutical industry because I want to make sure that they actually do the same exact thing. Precision medicine. This is the future. We have, everybody's an individual. Everybody's different. And when you're taking something that somebody else has taken and it's a cookie cutter model, and they keep saying there's a pill for this and a pill for that, now you're in the cycle. And what we want to do is we want to prevent diseases from expressing themselves. And we want to supplement ourselves personally with what's needed instead of hurting ourselves with those side effects. But the last thing I'll say on this topic is mental health. So mental health is a huge issue. It's been expressed so much over COVID. Why? Not because it just started, because people had genetic predispositions to stress reactivity, to PTSD. And because of the stressful event that they were going through, all those predispositions were turned on, those switches. So close to 30% of the general populations are treatment resistant depression. So meaning they have a genetic predisposition that is resistant to treatment from SSRIs. They still get prescribed SSRIs because they don't, conduct this testing. Now they will, which will not work for them, but they will experience all the side effects from SSRIs. So instead of doing that, why not test people in advance with a DNA test and let them know that they have treatment-resistant depression and look at other therapeutics? Same thing with opioids. Why is there an opioid crisis? Well, if you look at genetic predispositions, and I'm roughly saying 1 in 4 people have a opioid dependence genetic predisposition. So 4 of us go to a healthcare professional and we get prescribed an opioid for post-surgery, tooth extraction, whatever it is. 1 in 4 of us may flip the switch and be dependent on this going forward. So why not do a genetic predisposition test to know, hey, maybe you should take it, but you know what? It'll be a temporary thing. We're not going to give you a new prescription for that after the fact. We're going to recommend or suggest phytocannabinoids or other things that would be, effective as well. So that's my soapbox moment.
Wow, Len, you described so much. So my question is, as I'm listening to you, I want to learn more about my personal genetic DNA, so that way I don't trigger something down the road. So as a consumer, can I go to your website and get that done, or do I need to have a cannabis prescription card? So how does that work if I want to find out more about my DNA?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to endodna.com.
Okay.
You can purchase the test. The EndoDNA test itself retails at $199. You do not need a doctor prescription, even though doctors do have the ability to recommend and suggest this test as well. And if you've already taken a 23andMe, an Ancestry.com, MyFamilyTreeDNA, any other DNA test, you can use your data that you already have that exists. You can download your raw data, upload it to endodna.com, and we'll give you a report in less than a minute. So translate that, and that retails for $49.95.
Okay.
So basically anybody in any state, doesn't have to be a state that does medical or recreational, or it's really nothing to do with medical recreational. You're just doing a DNA test, right?
We're a health technology company. We're a global company. Our kits are sold all over the world. The thing that's different about what we do than most of the other DNA companies like 23andMe or an Ancestry, our reports are actionable. So what I mean by that is when I did my 23andMe, for instance, gave me, you're predisposed to alcohol flush. Okay, just as an example. What do I do with that? What's the action? So what we did when we designed ours is make sure they're actionable. And what I mean by that is you have your genetic predispositions. Then you have your suggested ratio of, since we're talking about cannabinoids, suggested ratio of cannabinoids and terpenes. Cannabinoids are the genetics of the plant. Terpenes are the essential oils of the plant. They're the ones that give it smell. And they also work with cannabinoids to produce an effect. Now that you have your formulation suggestion, so let's say it's 1-to-1. So 1 part CBD, 1 part THC, and let's say your terpene profile, the essential oil profile, would be like linalool and beta-caryophyllene. So linalool, just so you know, and I'm using these words, but just so everybody can understand, every single plant in nature produces an essential oil. Linalool is very close to what lavender produces. So it has a lavendery smell and it's calming. It reduces that anxiety that may be provoked by THC. Beta-caryophyllene is found like in cloves and black pepper, small amounts. In cannabis, it smells a little bit different, but that has an affinity for the CB2 receptor and helps to reduce inflammation. So now that you know that's your secret sauce, what do? Now you can go to a dispensary and say, hey, can you tell me every single product that you have that's a 1-to-1 with linalool and beta-caryophyllene? Or we have a marketplace that uses test results from different products, C of A's, certificate of analysis, and it goes to an algorithm and shows you how closely these products match your suggested ratio. So you can go and purchase that product. If it's a 0.3% THC product or less, you can get that product delivered to your home in all 50 states. If it's 0.3% or more, it depends on your state. Some delivery services, dispensaries, etc. But as I said, we're a global company. And one of the major keys is now that you did your test, now that you found your product or your vitamin, your supplement, how do you know that it's working for you? Well, the feedback loop mechanism is key. One of the things we do is we have a feedback loop dashboard that does 2 things. Number one, it gets a baseline health report from you. So you answer a survey question based on your symptomatic condition. So, sleep or pain or inflammation. So we have a baseline. Now that you consumed your formulation and you purchased your formulation or you got cannabis or whatever that is, now we can track the efficacy of that. So not only are we going to ask you, how is that working for you? So think about it as a pain scale. You're taking something that is because I tore my labrum in my left shoulder. So I had a lot of pain, maybe at a 9, maybe even at a 10. After you consume a protocol, my pain subsided to a 5 or a 6. That's one. The second thing, besides patient-reported outcome, is biometric feedback. So we have wearables. People have Oura rings, people wear Garmins, we have our own, but you'd be able to integrate your wearable device into the dashboard. So now you can see heart rate variability, blood oxygen level, all these different things, and you can track the efficacy of the protocol. And the kicker to this is that we use machine learning to learn from many people to make better predictive inferences, and then also create archetypical buckets. So meaning that people of your age group, people of your gender, or whatever that is, there's a archetype that this protocol has been efficacious for people that are more similar to you. And this is a really, really big thing because reviews are interesting. When I buy a product on Amazon, I buy a size medium. Well, if I am a certain height and somebody else is medium also, and they're 6'2", but they're skinnier than me, we may have a different fit. My medium may fit me exactly. The person who's 6'2" and still wears the same pant size, their fit's not going to be the same. So this is where that machine learning algorithm comes in handy to guide people to a more personalized experience.
You really enlighten us, and this is, unknown information to us. I mean, and it's so confusing reading this, reading that, state this, state that. But I have 2 questions. One question is kind of following up what you said about pharma and medical cannabis and some of the Jackie's questions. And so, we deal with pharma in the sense of, we do prescription drug planning, we do health plans, right? That's what, Jackie and I see prescriptions all the time. And here's what we understand, or at least what I understand. So my client goes to his doctor and says, hey, I have a backache, or the doctor diagnosed him with a heart disease or cancer or what have you, and prescribes him a specific medication, and it has its side effects and has its benefits. But the patient goes to the pharmacy, and the patient can only get that particular drug, meaning either the brand name or the generic of that drug. But if that drug doesn't help, the patient can't just go back to the pharmacy and say, give me a different one. He's got to go back to the doctor, and the doctor has to write him a new prescription. That is the pharmaceutical protocol, is my understanding. Now, how does this relate to cannabis. So people have, I'm talking about Pennsylvania. I don't know how other states operate, but in Pennsylvania currently to get medical cannabis, you got to have a medical card. So you go to the doctor. I'm just walking me through this. I'm going to walk you through my thought and tell me if I'm right or wrong. The patient and how your company can help. The patient goes to the doctor and says, hey, I can't sleep. Doctor says, okay, I'm going to write you out a medical card, and here's a prescription, and go to the odd knows how many dispensaries we have here in Pennsylvania. And so I go to this dispensary, I have my medical card, I have my prescription, but the prescription doesn't tell me which brand, which strain, which strength, which dose, which form. And I'm just like, give me cannabis. And the guy gives me cannabis, and I go home and I smoke it or drink it or whatever people do with it these days. There's many forms of it, right? So now your company comes in place and says, hey, don't do that. Why don't you figure out your DNA disposition and tell us what's going on? And we'll actually direct you in what your body actually needs when it comes to sleeping or backache or this, right as to how it's operating. It seems kind of weird how it operates. And that's why I think your, say, solution is like a good thing instead of just going with the flow, right?
Well, so you're almost 100% on point. The difference is because cannabis is still Schedule 1, and because it's not FDA approved, a doctor cannot write you a prescription for cannabis. What they do is they give you a recommendation. So you come in, and in Pennsylvania, you have pre-existing conditions that qualify. So if you have a pre-existing condition, which is just about anything, I can't sleep, I have headaches, or I have aches, I have pains, whatever it is, or a disease, the doctor can say, I think cannabis can be effective for you. I make a recommendation. So they don't give you, and most doctors really, and I'll tell you, they don't know about cannabis. So they don't know about the different strains or cultivars. They don't know about dosing. And we rely in this industry we rely on bud tenders, which are people that work in dispensaries. This is a major issue in the way we deliver this medicine to individuals, because I'm part of a documentary where actually a person is filming and writing a book about this, has a condition, has a condition that's related to an anxiety condition. So what I was doing with him, because if we did his DNA test, we were going from one dispensary to another. He would call them in advance, tell the manager or whoever the dispensary, I'm going to go in and I'm going to film and record this experience. Is it okay? Yes. So we come in and he tells them that he has this condition. And the difference between one dispensary, one bud tender to another, what they're recommending or suggesting to them was mind-blowing. We went into one, and he told them that he has this condition that is expressing in a lot of anxiety and stress. And he was taken to the flower section, which would exacerbate his condition immediately. And I actually intervened in one and said, where are your, more therapeutic products? Where are the one-to-ones? Where are the high CBD, low THC? They showed me a little shelf. And there was maybe like 6-7 different products on this little shelf with tinctures, which are like sublingual drops underneath your tongue. But they were just one-to-one THC and CBD. They didn't have any of those essential oils and terpenes. So I asked them, I said, do you have any products that have essential oils or terpenes? He said, no. He said, we don't believe in that because terpenes only work if they're combusted. So they're heated. So I said, well, if you go into Whole Foods and you go into the aisle where they have a bunch of different essential oils, they're all essential oils, sublingual delivery oils. So you're telling me that all those oils don't work either. Now, he didn't know what to say. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the system from the physician to the actual dispensary is broken because the doctors prescribe cannabis. And we're actually working right now with a company called Cannacare Docs. that give you medical cannabis cards. So now that the doctor gives you a card, you can take our test to find out what to take, how much to take, and where to get it, now that you have the recommendation. So I'm not trying to circumvent a bud tender, but the bud tender and you should be able to be on the same page and be in a more collaborative state. So if you're coming in and you're saying, can you show me where the products that you have that are similar to this profile, that's my secret sauce? Now you empower them to guide you to the products that you need. But if you're coming in blindly into a dispensary, you're going to be, you may be overwhelmed with all the different products. You don't know what to take. The good thing is cannabis, nobody's ever died of cannabis. So you don't have to worry about having, an experience that is going to kill you. However, you can still have an experience that's going to be intense. And I'll give you one more example. Grandma Mary, who was diagnosed with cancer and started going through chemo, and saw Dr. Sanjay Gupta on TV saying, hey, cannabis is really good for the side effects of chemo. She went into a dispensary and the bud tender said, hey, Grandma, you know what? Gummies are a great way to be able to consume cannabis. Grandma said, great. She went home, took 2 gummies. He said, take it easy. Don't take more, or maybe she took 1 gummy. I don't remember. But take it easy. Don't take too much. Start low and slow. Well, Grandma had waited, nothing happened. All of a sudden, Grandma started having an experience that was extremely intense. Not only did she start to hallucinate, she reported, but she had an extremely, extremely intense experience. And number one said afterwards, I'm not going to consume cannabis anymore because that's a feeling that I don't want to have. Number 2, she started telling everybody in her circle, stay away from the devil's lettuce. Well, if Grandma took an endoDNA test in advance, she would have known she was a poor metabolizer of THC. Number 2, she would have known that she has predispositions to stress reactivity and something called psychomimetic effects, which is psychosis-like effects. So by changing what she consumed, number 1, instead of eating a gummy, which goes through your first pass, your liver does a conversion, she can consume it sublingually, which bypasses your liver, so under your tongue. Number 2, instead of having an intense experience with THC, she had a high CBD, low THC ratio with different terpene profiles. And dosing, as I said. Now that she actually found that ratio, which was extremely helpful for her, she would walk around. They were doing chemo in a room with many people in the room that go around. She would go around with her business card, giving it to people that were taking chemo and saying, you have to call these people because this cannabis is helping me so much with the side effects of chemo without having the adverse effects that I experienced in the first place. So if every single doctor that actually recommends cannabis then says, take a DNA test so you can have a precision personalized experience, that would be a way to be able to overcome and solve that challenge.
Wow. So yes. My next question is, so the knowledge that you have, and I'm just at the dispensary level, if I were to go there to work, would I have that same, maybe not to the level because you have 25 years of experience, but at least some training, some education to guide someone if they had a CV, if they came in with their card for the very first time. And I'm talking about someone who may not have gotten the DNA testing, but if I were to go to my local dispensary, are they training folks at that retail counter level? As they're
sounds like a disconnect. Sounds like what I described, what Len said, I was almost 100%, that there is a disconnect. Sounds like what I'm hearing from Len, that there is a disconnect. And his DNA technology seems to be essential, especially in the medical cannabis space. I'm perplexed.
Yeah, so different dispensary, different trainings. I'm not saying the training doesn't exist. There are certification programs for training programs. There are universities. So I just did a lecture at the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, LACOM, which is the largest osteopathic medical program in the country. and they're training future doctors. So they had me come in and lecture on dosing. So future generations of doctors and healthcare professionals are starting to be trained in this. There is a gap, and the gap is, a mom and pop dispensary may not have the access to the same training as somebody else. Experience. Some bud tenders have been around for 25 years. Some are new. So there is no standard of training. There are certification programs, and there are programs that you can get. You can get a master's degree. Like, I have one. I have one in medicinal cannabis. There's many universities that are teaching this right now. So training needs to get standardized. We need to be able to train our healthcare professionals better. But, I've spoken to doctors that didn't even know there was an endocannabinoid system. And they went to medical school, but it wasn't taught to them in medical school. So there is a gap. And the way to bridge that gap is remove prohibition altogether. Remove prohibition, create standards, industry standards for testing, for training, for quality control, QA, QC. Now we're going to be able to use cannabis as a supplement. If I go into my vitamin store, I can go into the one in LA, and I can go into one in Philly, and I can get the same exact supplement. I don't have to think about it. It's been tested. There's a standard. I can see what the ingredients labels are. We don't have that in cannabis space. If I go in and buy one in LA, it's no guarantee that I'm going to get the same one in Philly. If I go into one in Philly, down the street from another one, we have different products there as well, different testing standards. So we need to be able to do that. There is a path that's been paved already. Alcohol, there was prohibition. When prohibition was lifted, alcohol was never made, legal or illegal. There was prohibition. Prohibition was lifted. Once prohibition was lifted, there's things that started. And I'm not comparing cannabis to alcohol. I'm just comparing legalities, prohibition. So once that was lifted, two things happened. Number one, there was a board that was created for standards. So everybody, you couldn't make moonshine and sell your moonshine with, things floating in it that's going to harm people. Do no harm first. You're going to be able to create quality control. Number two, it created these conglomerates of interstate commerce. So you created different states had different laws. Pennsylvania was a state that said, we're going to have a liquor control board that's going to sell our liquor through state-controlled liquor stores. In California, they said you can buy your liquor at a 7-Eleven. It doesn't matter. But the states can create that interstate commerce, but you're still going to buy the same quality of alcohol. It doesn't matter if you buy it in a state-controlled store in Pennsylvania or you buy it at a 7-Eleven in LA. So these are the things that need to happen. Pharmaceutical industry needs to start making drugs that are specific to diseases that they're going to do clinical trials on that use phytocannabinoids from the plant, which they're doing now. And that lifts the whole industry. But my prediction is the industry is going to split into two. You're going to have a medicinal industry that is specific for diseases like pharma. The second thing is you're going to have a supplementation industry that's going to give you OTC products like they do now. You'll still have your craft breweries every once in a while, but big ag is going to get involved in production of all the source material, and you're going to have big businesses getting into the extraction and creating these supplements that are identical no matter where you buy them. And in order for us to get out of, as I said, the dark ages, and by the way, this is what's happening in many countries. It's not, the United States is no longer the beacon of what the future of cannabis is. There are many countries that are doing it the right way. Germany, actually, insurance covers cannabis in Germany. Wow. And the way that it works in Germany is you have to have, and different countries do. A lot of countries, insurance covers it. In Germany, the way it works is you go to a doctor. The doctor had to have tried. You have a pre-existing condition, which is a lot of one intervention had to be tried prior to cannabis. So whatever drug you took wasn't really effective. Now they recommend cannabis, and it's a form. As soon as the doctor recommends cannabis, they click condition, it goes out to the insurance carrier. They get a pre-approval. Now it goes through the pipeline and it says, these are the products that I recommend. There's only about 6 suppliers, so they have their own challenges. And now you are able to consume that product. It's covered 100% by insurance. So the future of this looks bright. And other countries are taking lead over the United States because they're looking at it at a federal level, not just a state to state. We live in a country that has 50 different countries in it. That's the biggest challenge. And we can't all get together. We even speak different languages from different states. So it's got to be done on a federal level.
So Len, can you tell me how many states currently have medical cannabis legal and how many states have recreational cannabis legal?
Yeah, I believe it's 38 states that have a medical program. There's about 14 states that have recreational or adult use programs. And there's a few states that are on the ballot now. Some of those states actually voted in cannabis, but do not have a program yet. They're still working through the logistics and legalities of how to implement the program. But that's changed, including, by the way, the District of Columbia. So DC, funny enough, ironically, is legal where the federal government resides and saying that it's a Schedule 1. So
it's all very, that is how the United States is, the laws and the rules and the states and the feds, and it's all a mess. And again, we really appreciate being on the show. I have a question, and is there medical cannabis, if I'm even using the right term, for animals? I mean, are veterinarians prescribing? I have dogs, and my question relates to dogs. I mean, really all animals, but really specifically to, yes.
Hi.
Okay.
This is Hershey. She's a cannabis consumer, and
so,
she
talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, my dog is going through some things. I'm not even sure if I'm approach the veterinarian about some of these things for cannabis, or do I do a DNA test on my dog with you? I don't even know how that works.
I mean, there are DNA tests for dogs. We don't have a dog DNA test yet. That's something that we're developing. But just to give you, so this is what I would say is a peace of mind. First of all, dogs have an endocannabinoid system, just like humans do. The challenge with dogs and cats also is they're very sensitive to THC. So you have to be very careful on, we have a lot of vets. I actually spoke at a veterinarian conference, and they talked about a lot of dogs coming into the emergency room, a veterinarian emergency room, with eating their owner's cannabis chocolates. The dogs would eat it. First of all, chocolate's not good for dogs anyway, but it's full of THC. The idea is to consume a CBD product, a cannabidiol product that has virtually no or very little THC, and to be able to bind to those receptors and still as an anti-inflammatory product. So I'll give you an example. We have a formulation that's called Relief. It's an anti-inflammatory formulation, and it's designed for humans to reduce inflammation. We've had so many people come back and say, I've given this product to my dog for their arthritis, for their tremors they have, and it worked. So we've licensed this product right now to a manufacturer in South America, and it's going to be manufactured as a pet product in South America. Wasn't our intent, but bottom line is, yes, CBD, especially CBD, very low THC, has been shown to be extremely efficacious for dogs.
Wow, thank you. I'm very interested in that, and hopefully that's something that's going to be more accepted here in at least in Pennsylvania in the U.S.
I'm sure you can go into a pet store and get a CBD product with 0% THC in a treat.
Yeah, I see that everywhere, but I'm just afraid, back to this is insanity, what am I dosing my dog with? Do I know what he's predispositioned to? Like, am I giving him the right stuff? So same thing here. You go to the dispensary and you've got a back problem or sleeping problem. The bud tender whether they're certified or knowledgeable enough, could put you in a completely different direction.
Yeah,
and I don't want that to happen to my dog, because he can't tell me, hey, dude, you gave me like the wrong stuff, right? He's not going to tell me that. I'm going to just watch him either. I don't even know what the side effects could be.
Yeah, well, I mean, with CBD, very low side effects, if any. It's not a euphoric product, so it doesn't get you high. It doesn't bind to those receptors. But you can see dosing wise, you're absolutely correct. It's going to have to be trial and error, but you'll know about side effects. So there's virtually very, very small amounts of side effects from cannabidiol, from CBD. So as long as you don't create a euphoric product that has THC, I think you can be fine. And dosing, start low and slow. They actually have treats that already have CBD in them. So starting with one or half of one and seeing how your dog does. But you're absolutely right. That's something that we're working on to get more a precise protocol for pets as well. Not only dogs, by the way. There's equestrian products for horses. People are using CBD a lot for horses that run on tracks to reduce their inflammation in their joints. Cats and other mammals that have an endocannabinoid system.
Interesting. I appreciate you answering that question. So, Len, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but Jackie, before we wrap up, I know you're very excited for this show, and so am I. Do you have any more questions for Len?
I am going to check out your website. I am definitely interested in learning more I think for the future, and we're going to come back again because I'm going to make sure I get that DNA test done. I'm fortunate that I don't have any predispositions in terms of health, knock on wood, but I definitely from time to time feel a little bit of a joint pain. So from just working out, just being active. So, but I'm definitely going to continue the conversation just so our viewers can see if they haven't tried the DNA testing, what does that look like real time with me? So
yeah, well, if you would like at some point, I'll give you a code. Take the test. I'll go over the results with you. We can make it another program. And for your audience, if anybody wants to take the test, I'll give a code. It's Len, Len 25. Give 25% off any product, and they can also buy my book. And it's called Making Cannabis Personal. It's available on Amazon or wherever you get books. And the interesting, yep, that's the code. So the interesting part about my book is there's a story and Ethan and I go way back, but there's a story that my parents actually would catch me consuming cannabis and eventually kick me out. But not only kick me out, they actually called the cops and try to have me arrested. And when I've been on my own, and I had a really tense relation with my parents, let's say, for years after that. But the irony of that is both my parents consume products right now that we manufacture. When I was in Philly visiting, my dad had knee surgery and he asked me to bring him some. And he recorded a testimonial for us saying that he was in a lot of pain. He couldn't move his knee. And he took an EndoDNA test, got the formulation that was suggested for him. And then he's shown how well he can move his knee, walks around the neighborhood every day. And it really, really tremendously helped him. And there's no better testimonial that I could have from a person that did a complete 180 in his belief. And now every single time there's a story on cannabis or anything that's going on, he'll call me or he'll forward me the link because now he's a believer and a fan. So by doing it yourself and actually guiding you to that experience, maybe it can change some people's minds.
wow.
Well, all parents are old school, Len, and they came from the old school mentality. But I'm glad to see that your parents came around. Len, before we let you go, I want you to talk a little bit about your book. Talk a little bit about your show, where our guests can find you. I mean, we have your website up, but if you can talk a little about your book, where they can buy your book, where they can find your show, that would be great for our viewers.
Yeah. So my book you can buy on Amazon. It's called Making Cannabis Personal. It's got great forwards by Dr. Ethan Russo. We have stories about different individuals who have their own stories, similar to Graham and Mary that I just mentioned. Talks about my journey, you know, the experience of my parents, etc., and then what we're doing today. It's a book that my business partner challenged me to write a book that he can read from on a plane from LAX to JFK, and that's basically what I wrote. It's a short book. It's got a lot of pictures. Maybe Ethan is even in one of those pictures in the middle. Who knows? You have to buy the book and see. But there's definitely pictures of me with long hair in there, so that would be interesting to find and see.
Before and after.
Exactly, before and after. And I have a podcast called Everything is Personal, and you can find that wherever you know, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. We have a lot of great guests, not only cannabis related, music related. Be Real. I guess he's both. System of Down. We have great, interesting guests on there. Over 100 episodes. And you can find me on social, Len May, LenMay, Len May DNA on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, reach out.
Well, we're definitely going to put that information in the descriptor when we post the video so everyone can see it, and definitely put the code out there for our viewers if they're interested in getting that DNA testing done. I think it's essential. It's the code to get your DNA testing done is Len25. You go to the website, endodna.com to put in that code to get that DNA. So again, Len, what a wealth of information. I learned so much. I'm definitely going to have to do the replay myself and take some more notes and to better understand what you shared with our viewers and us today. So thank you for your talent and your expertise.
Well, I appreciate it.
Len, thank you so much, man.
And thank you, both of you. I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, and you're, I like the energy, and you're exposing us and what we do to maybe a whole new audience. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the show. Look forward to seeing you in person.
You got it. Come to LA.
All right, man.
All right.
I'll see you. Thank you so much, Len.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Len. Wow. That was like information overload.
Yes. Yes. And so it was a great show. Hopefully you viewers enjoyed it. And Jackie, thank you as well.
Ethan,
a lot of good questions. Next week's guest will be Mark from GFit Nutrition. And he's going to be sharing with us a lot of information that maybe we know, maybe we don't know, but we're going to have Mark from GFit Nutrition on our show next week. I wanted to thank you, everybody, for coming and viewing and logging in and checking in to our show. And
we need you to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of great information. And Ethan, if you or any of our viewers, if you know of someone who could benefit, could be a guest to share information with our audience, please click the link, send us and consult with us on info@planwell2livewell.com, because we're definitely looking for content. We're definitely looking for sponsorships.
Yes, we are. And we want to thank everybody again for joining, and our special guest today.
Hi. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. I am Jackie.
I'm Ethan.
And we want you to plan well, to live well. Take care.